Today, I want to talk to you all about something that literally drove me crazy, and that is every time I was put on steroids, aka prednisone. I was on prednisone quite a bit, especially the first 5 years that I was diagnosed with IBD, which, looking back, probably wasn't the best thing, but I was diagnosed in 2006. I was also in the military, and one thing the military gastroenterologist always did was, oh, you're flaring again, we're going to put you on steroids. So basically, I would start having symptoms, and my symptoms were pretty severe. It would be several bloody bowel movements a day and also urgency. So my gastroenterologist would prescribe prednisone. My symptoms would disappear as I tapered off the prednisone. I still was having an absence of symptoms. However, 3 weeks after I was completely tapered off of the prednisone, my symptoms would come back. It was this vicious cycle on and off for several years. So one thing nobody told me about being on prednisone is that it probably may change the way you think. You're not sleeping as well. And for me personally, I turned a bit crazy and also mean. And my personality in general is, I am a very understanding person. I usually will listen. I don't hold grudges. However, when I'm on steroids, I turn into one crazy bitch. It's crazy to think about, but I could be quite irrational. However, now, years later, I recognize that my entire personality changes and I don't lash out, especially to those who are closest to me, because they usually were getting my wrath, which again, I feel so horrible about all these years later. But I want to tell you about a couple irrational things that I did that I would never do if I wasn't on prednisone. But because my mental psyche was different and I felt a little crazy and I also behaved crazy sometimes, I think you all should know some of these stories, just so you could be aware, but also maybe you can relate to them. So it was about 3:30 in the morning. If you've been on prednisone, you know you don't really sleep that well. At least I know I don't, and many people I've spoken to also don't sleep very well when they're on prednisone, especially high doses of prednisone. So I was actually asleep at the time though, and it was 3:30, and I thought I heard something outside. So I was like, surely there's nobody outside at 3:30 in the morning, but I'm gonna peek out my bedroom window just in case to see if anything's there. Well, I peeked out my bedroom window, and guess what? There was literally two guys on either side of my husband's car trying to figure out a way in. I was living in Norfolk, Virginia at the time, and I couldn't believe it. My husband was on deployment. He was in the military, and I thought to myself, how dare you try and steal his car while he's out on deployment? And it's not like it was a fancy car. It was a Volkswagen GTI. So for the first time in my life, I saw red. I always thought that was a figure of speech, but truly, I saw red. So I realized, oh, seeing red means you're really, really angry. So I did what any rational person would do. I ran outside. Yes, clearly that's very irrational, and looking back, I would never do that. However, I was so angry that I literally hopped out of bed, sprinted down the hallway. I turned on the hallway light as I was running down the stairs, and it's really good that I did that because that alert the possible burglars that, oh, somebody in this house is awake. So they started running down the street. I swing open the door to my house and I start chasing them down the street. And here is the kicker. I didn't even, I had my underwear on, but that was about it because I had just woken up and I was so crazy. I literally sprinted down the street chasing after them. And, I stopped probably halfway down the street and I thought to myself, well, I don't have very many clothes on and this is a really bad idea. So I ran home. Looking back, I can't believe I did that. What would I have done? What would I have done if these two would-be burglars stopped and decided to attack me? To be honest, I was fucking crazy. So I probably would have unleashed the beast, but it was not one of my better judgments, and it's certainly something I would never do again. But again, would I have done that if I wasn't on prednisone? Absolutely not. What I probably would have done if I wasn't on prednisone was I would have picked up the phone like any normal person and dialed 911. However, I was not in my normal mental state. So that is one example of where I acted completely irrational when I was on prednisone, whereas I would never behave that way if I wasn't on prednisone. So If any of you have been through something similar, I would love to know. Prednisone is often prescribed for autoimmune diseases and several other things, from allergies to like anything. So please let me know if you've been through this. You don't have to have IBD to go through this with the prednisone. Another crazy time, my poor husband came home from deployment, and I was in my routine, and I was used to going to this restaurant that I really liked and getting pumpkin pancakes. So I said, hey, it's Saturday. Let's go get pumpkin pancakes. This is what I've been doing while you've been out at sea. And he was like, well, why would we go to a restaurant? We can make them so much better here at home. And for some reason that set me off. Again, I was thinking irrationally. I was on a high dose of prednisone, so I yelled at him. I'm like, why? Why wouldn't we go? I don't want home pancakes. And then I got so angry that I pushed him onto the couch, which, looking back, that is so horrible. Like, I'll never forget the look of surprise on his face. Like, did you literally just push me onto the couch? And then I stomped upstairs, slammed the bathroom door, and started sobbing uncontrollably. And so this my poor husband is like, who is this person and what happened? Because he left right as I received my IBD diagnosis. So I got my diagnosis of, at the time it was ulcerative pancreatitis. Years later, we know that I actually have Crohn's disease, but it is not uncommon to be, diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, but then later find out, oh, it's actually Crohn's disease. So because the disease can present in different ways depending on where it wants to show up. And so he left right as I was getting diagnosed. And when he came back, I was, probably 15 pounds heavier. He'd never seen me that heavy. And I also had a completely different personality because I was on a high dose of prednisone. So he's probably thinking, who are you? And what happened to my wife? Because we dated for 4 years before we got married. So yeah, he had never seen me in this mental state. So what did I have to do? I knew I had to come up with a strategy because I couldn't keep lashing out to those closest around me. It was not fair to them. And I also didn't like when I behaved that way, especially when I had calmed down and had time to think. So, as I matured in my steroid journey, I decided, okay, I'm going to make a deal with myself. And I also told my husband, I'm going to make a deal with you. When we know I'm going to be put on prednisone, even if I get really, really mad and I want to lash out at you, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And, he's thinking like, oh, thank goodness, because you're crazy. So lo and behold, of course, I have to go on prednisone again at some point. And so we're driving in the car. I'm on a high dose of prednisone. My husband said something. I don't remember what it was, but it made me super angry. But I had made a deal with him and myself that I was not going to act irrationally and lash out at those closest to me. So though he said something that made me very angry, I sat there quietly, but I was fuming. He could tell I was fuming, but I didn't say anything. And then I started crying because I was so mad that I couldn't be mean. So I started crying because I couldn't be mean, because I was on steroids and I was mad at him and I wanted to lash out and be mean. However, that really set the precedent of, okay, if I'm put on prednisone, this is how I'm going to behave. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Even if I am really fuming, I am not going to lash out and be mean to those around me because it's not fair to them. So these are just a couple of my stories. I have several more stories, but every time I was put on prednisone, I felt like Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters and I was so angry. But really looking back and telling these stories, it's surreal to think that, that's how I behaved and that was me. But hey, you know what? This is life. This is my IBD journey. And, I just want to share it with you all. So please let me know if you've had any similar experiences. I do read my messages, so definitely drop me a message and I look forward to sharing more with you later.